last year at this time, you broke a little event called the iPhone tracking stuff.
Yeah.
And it was at Where last year.
It was at Where last year, yeah.
And a lot of publicity, a lot of people talking about it, a lot of people angry.
Yep.
Has anything happened since that time, or?
Well, I'm having a very different Where experience this year. It's last year was more like the service tunnels of the hotel and being like shuffled between rooms, and this year is more sitting in talks. So that's a bit of a different thing. But there was actually quite a lot of fun stuff that came out of the location gate stuff. So there was a site called crowdflow.net. I think it's crowdflow.net. They actually asked people to contribute their location data set. And I think they got about 1,000 people to contribute their location data set. And there's some really nice visualizations that came out of that, showing how the movements around Europe mostly, and the US, and the western east coast of the US, and a few other nice things that came out of that. There's some really nice visualizations. The other thing that's come out of that is that there's actually some, I can never say this right, I'll have a go, spatial epidemiology. Yeah, I almost got it right. So some spatial epidemiology that's coming out. So people, the guys that do this don't really know how healthy people move around. So they've got lots of data on how sick people move around, but not how healthy people move around. So they've now got a controlled data set to compare how diseases spread, because that's what spatial epidemiology is. Couldn't get it that time. You see, 3 times in a row. Wasn't going to happen.
Tough one though.
But it's about how diseases spread, and they didn't really have a controlled data set about how people moved around when they weren't sick. Because when you're sick, you're willing to contribute data about how you move around, but how you move around is different. As in, you go to a hospital, you go to your doctors, you stay in bed, that sort of stuff. But there was no control data set. So people are actually using this data, the iPhone tracking stuff, as a control data set for that.
And are they volunteering that data though, right?
Yeah, they're volunteering.
Which is a little different.
Yeah,
so. Speaking of volunteering data, I really like that idea where you actually volunteer it. It's not just someone has figured out what to scrape or how to scrape your data.
Yeah.
I listened to a talk this morning, I think you were in there, about the whole scraping Foursquare and scraping Twitter.
Yeah.
And then retracing someone's movements.
Yes.
That's a little creepy in a way. I know it's kind of public, but unless I say yes to that somewhere, I think that's like borderline.
But of course, the thing is, you have said yes. You published it. I mean, you're saying implicitly yes as you publish the data, right?
Yes, I have. I guess that would be the qualification. You're either tweeting it, or you're checking in with Foursquare. However, when someone goes back and assembles it all together and looks at your journeys and your tracks,
yes, absolutely. It's a very different. It's a different thing. It's like there was actually an interesting paper recently where, and I can't remember which university it was, but I think I posted about it on the Radar recently. And you can actually assemble, guess people's location based on where their friends are. So even if you don't geotag your tweets, based on 8 or 9 or 10 of your friends who do geotag your tweets, you can actually sort of assemble a rough location for you. And if you occasionally geotag your tweets by cross-correlating those geotag tweets with the geotag tweets from your friends, you can actually get a much more confident prediction of where you are, like 70 or 80%, even if you're not currently geotagging your tweets. So it's not just you that's posting a location and leaking data, it's like your friends and everyone you know as well.
And so Google Plus and Facebook, they all have that sort of geo piece built in, so you can start to pull together.
In fact, if you post, I think if you actually post anything from the Facebook app on iOS now, it's automatically geotagged. And I don't think there's any way to turn that off. Certainly the last couple of times I've done that, I've noticed that there's a geotag attached.
Do things like Spotify and Pandora and all that, do they track where you've come into their service from? I
don't actually know.
That would be interesting too, because they could put together a real social picture of everything you've done and where you're going.
Yeah, I mean, most of these services have APIs, and I mean, I know people have got into trouble in the past by doing mass harvests from these APIs. They've been sued, or they've just basically got into trouble by doing it.
Shut down,
and been shut down. But did you see the post recently about girls near you?
Yes.
Yeah. So they've been shut down. So Foursquare have cut them off from their API. Interestingly, Facebook haven't.
So I wonder why that would be.
Yeah, they said they're looking into it. But Foursquare just cut them off from the API as soon as it sort of went public that they were doing
this.
Yeah,
that could be a problem, especially if the girls near you weren't of the right age and there's this tracking ability going on or disclosure going on.
I mean, to be clear, they were doing nothing illegal.
Right.
Right? Because both the Foursquare and the Facebook API were publishing this data. So the people were implicitly giving their permission to publish the data and pass it on to the API because they were publishing in the clear. They didn't necessarily know they were publishing it in the clear, which is a whole different thing. They were essentially leaking the data.
Right, that is interesting though, but can a person under 18 do that?
Are you allowed on Facebook if you're under 18?
I don't know, but
don't think you are.
Can you actually post your public whereabouts?
Well, you can.
You can, but I mean, can someone republish that for a minor? I wonder if that's...
That's an interesting corner case. I'll retreat into I am not a lawyer, nor do I play one on television.
Me neither, but I like to think about the corner cases. Yeah. So what other corner cases are you seeing with geo? Where are we going with geo? I mean, to me, this is what, the fifth year of WHERE or something like that. And, you know, early on it was all hype about, wow, you have maps and people can know where. Now we're so far past that.
Yeah.
Where are we going with this?
I mean, it's a really interesting question. I mean, I think we're on a sort of a bit of a tipping point with the geo stuff. It's becoming ubiquitous. You're assuming you know the location. I mean, a lot of the software. I mean, especially on the mobile platforms now, and even on the desktop and the web apps, where you can get the location into your web app now from your laptop or wherever now. A lot of these apps are now just assuming the location is known. A lot of them don't function if they don't have the location. So the location has become commoditized. So it's no longer this gee whizzy thing that, you know, it's like, oh wow, if we have location, then we can put people on the map and we can like do this. It's just like, well, you know, our stuff just doesn't work. You have to have location turned on. So the next step is, well, if location is ubiquitous, if you can assume location in your app all the time, what new things are enabled by the fact that not that you can get location, but the location is always going to be available. And I think that's going to be an interesting thing to watch this year, next year, where people are just going to automatically assume that this is available for everyone.
To me, it's like location and social.
Yeah. Have
to be built into every app.
Yeah.
Like one is to know where you are, and two, who of your friends may have been there or are there.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. If your startup is a geo startup, and it's based on maps and people have location, or your startup is a social startup, and it's just like, wow, we're going to social network. It's just like, well,
what's new?
Yeah. Okay. Sure. That's fine, but that's not very interesting anymore. That's commodity. I mean, Facebook now is a commodity layer. I think that they're now the largest provider of identity in the web now, Facebook, because
their authentication.
Their authentication library. Because certainly on mobile, it's built in everywhere.
Yeah, I'd imagine that or Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, the integration of Twitter into iOS at an OS level. I mean, it's in the operating system.
Yeah.
It's not above, and it's going to be in the new Mountain line. So it's going to start to come onto the desktop side on Apple. Twitter is built into the operating system. I mean, that's a whole move forward from where social was.
Or move backward. Almost sounds like Microsoft building in Internet Explorer into the operating system.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's an interesting point. I mean, the other thing about, if you look at on Mountain Lion, there are other accounts, not just Twitter. So on the accounts framework on iOS, the only account type there is Twitter. But on Mountain Lion, there's other types of accounts.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's a generic accounts framework where it's built into the operating system.
And can you have your profile remember which account you want to use for anything you do?
Yeah.
That would be nice. Yeah. So where are you going in the future with geo and what you're doing?
I'm actually in the middle of a really interesting project, wearing my academic hat. So we actually have, I've written a mobile application in collaboration with the Comp Sci department at the University of Exeter. And this is actually a tracking application. So all the functionality that got taken out of the iOS after Location Gate, I've actually written an app to put it back in. So what this does is it uses...
Assumingly that I opt into having
assuming you opt in,
yes. Exactly.
So what this actually has is a geofence around campus. So it's a dotted line around campus. Inside the geofence, you're tracked using GPS. Outside the geofence, you're not tracked at all. So basically, we currently have it deployed. It's sort of an alpha test group. There's about 20, 30 of us or something. And what we're looking for is correlations. So we're actually looking for flocking behavior in humans. So we've got the comp sci people, the psychologists, and the geographers, and myself, who's actually based in physics department, but I'm doing comp sci type things. So we're looking at how groups form, how people move around, how these groups move around, how the social interactions build up. And what we're actually hoping to do is this coming academic year, we're hoping to deploy this application to all the incoming freshers. So there's going to be an iOS version and an Android version. And, you know, we'll run this by the ethics committee, and it's all fine. And it's like, we're hoping to, you know, we're going to incentivize the incoming freshmen to run this application, possibly offer some sort of prizes or something like that. And what we'll have is we'll have a data set that we'll be able to look at and see how new students arriving on campus, how the groups, you know, the social groups you form.
Exactly.
As you come on and arrive at a new university, how they form and how that influences their academic career. The other interesting thing from a buildings and services point of view is, well, you know, all these people, they go to this lecture, but they hang out over here in this building. Oh, well, if we move their lecture over here, does that improve the attendance rate at the lecture? So you can actually do an optimization of the which rooms are used to do what lectures and which tutorials, just by looking at this data set. But you can also see how the spaces are used and how groups form, and a whole bunch of interesting things can come out of it.
I can see that on a citywide basis would be pretty interesting too.
Yeah, I mean, we also have some people interested in using it for using the same sort of app to study things like football matches. That's the other sort of football, not your sort of football.
Yeah.
And how crowds move in there, and a whole bunch of other things like that. So there's some interesting... I mean, this is nothing new. I mean, there's geolocation, which is Aaron and Amber. They out of Portland. They do a startup where you can leave geotagged notes.
Oh, right. That was really cool.
Yeah, for each other, and as you move around. So they use geofences. It's the exact same underlying tech. But I mean, the interesting thing here is actually the analysis of the movement patterns and all that sort of stuff. So it's the aggregate data set that's interesting, not the individual data sets.
But this is opt-in again, too.
Yeah, it's opt-in. Yeah.
So we could, like a citywide thing, could actually opt in. They could track where the best walking places were, because, like, you know, in some of the East Coast cities in the U.S., you see the sidewalks are where the path used to be.
Yeah.
So they're kind of meandering.
Yeah.
You know, like through the garden.
I mean, that's actually a standard design tactic if you're designing like a campus or something. You sort of basically don't put any sidewalks in.
Just watch the
and you wait to see where the worn grass is. Yeah. And then that's where you put your paths. I mean, that's a fairly legitimate architectural technique.
Yeah.
And if you I've actually looked at some of the preliminary data we're getting, and you can actually see exactly where I cut across the grass and where other people have cut across the grass as well inside the data. Because, you know, it's when you're on campus, it's GPS. It's like you've got a 5 meter circle or something. And especially if you've got 2 or 3 people walking together, you can do like an optimization, so you can get that much further down. And you can actually see that, you know, instead of going around this piece of grass, I will always walk across it. And, you know, there's one person in the group that never walks across it, always goes around type thing. And it's really interesting to look at.
Yeah. It's been great talking with you.
Thank you.
Hope to see you again at upcoming conference.
Sure. It's been good to be here.
Thanks.